let's take a moment and cultivate our motivation. So let's think that we'll listen and share together this evening so that we can develop wisdom and compassion in our lives, so that we can increase our own happiness, but also make a positive contribution to the welfare of society and to all living beings. So let's place what we're about to do, our sharing together this evening, very firmly within the context of serving other living beings. And then slowly open your eyes. Okay. So, I arrived in your beautiful town this afternoon, and the first thing I learned was how to pronounce the name. And I was cautioned not to say Moscow, because you might throw tomatoes at me. And that I should say Moscow. So it's very nice to be here with you. So we're going to talk about wisdom and compassion and how to incorporate them in our daily lives. And I want to start with one phrase that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's one of my teachers, often uses. And he says, "My religion is kindness." And I said, wow, my religion is kindness. And the reason he says that is because our whole life depends upon the kindness of others, and others' well-being depends upon our kindness. And from the moment we're born, we have kindness surrounding us, and we are taken care of by others' kindness. And he says that is the essence of any religion. All the theology, philosophy is extra added stuff to convince us to be kind to each other. Isn't that nice? Yeah? My religion is kindness. So, it doesn't start out with do's and don'ts and heaven and hell and all that kind of stuff. It starts out with our basic experience of human kindness, which is something that we all need to thrive. They've done studies about babies who, bond tightly and experience a lot of kindness with their parents, and they grow up to be much more balanced individuals, due to the kindness that they receive when they're little. And if you look around, everything we have, everything we know, everything we're able to do, all of that actually depends on the kindness of others. Because when you think about it, we all came into this world not knowing much. And if you think you're broke now, when you were born, you were really broke. We came out of the womb totally impoverished, didn't we? We didn't come out of the room holding a credit card. We came out of the womb just completely dependent on the kindness of other living beings. And the fact that we're still here today is indicative that we've been the recipients of kindness. because without the kindness of others, we would have died long, long time ago. Yeah? Your parents have probably told you of things you did when you were little, whereby you almost killed yourself. You know, those things, like remember the days of the metal curlers and sticking those into the electrical outlets? Yeah, people who are my age, you know, with the dinosaurs, we remember that. Yeah, and all the times we almost fell down the stairs, or we crossed the street without looking both ways, or we decided to do some stunt on our skateboard and wound up with the skateboard on top of us, you know. So all of these things, you know, we have gotten ourselves into a lot of messes in our lives, yeah, but we're still alive because other beings were kind to us. Yeah. I remember one time being in India with a young child, and he had put something in his mouth and was choking, and all of the monks and nuns kind of went, "What do we do?" You know, because none of us had kids. And his mom just walked by. He was about 2, 3, grabbed his legs, hung him upside down, whacked his bottom. It came out, put him down, and Mom kept walking. You know? And it was like she knew the exact thing to do to help her child in that moment. That kept the child from choking. Yeah? So on in our lives, when we really look, we've received so much kindness. You know? It starts with the people who took care of us when we were babies, whether it be our parents or somebody else. You know, the people who got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to feed us. Yeah? How many of you are parents? Oh, a number of you, yeah? So you know those days, yeah? But we were once on the other side of it, you know, the ones wailing at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning because we were hungry and somebody came and fed us. Yeah? Very kindly. They didn't scream at us for crying. They fed us, put us back to bed. They went back to bed and were sleep deprived for, I don't know what, 2, 3 years when you have an infant. Yeah? And it's just that kind of automatic kindness. And skills we have on that we take so much for granted. Even the skill right now of knowing how to use language. The fact that I can speak, that you can hear and understand. No? We have this ability to use language due to the kindness of people who taught us how to speak. No? All the people who used to hold us when we were babies and go, goo, goo, ga, ga, you know, so that we could see how they formed their lips. And, you know, and in that way, by mimicking them, we learn to speak. Yeah? Imagine if nobody had taught us how to speak, where would we be? Yeah? Or if, when we were in school, or if we didn't have the chance to go to school, and so we didn't know how to read or write, another basic skill that we take so much for granted, that we use every single day, reading and writing. But we know that due to the kindness of other people who taught us. If you have an athletic ability or a musical ability, dancing, artistry, yeah, any kind of ability, if you're a computer nerd, you know, whatever special ability you have. Yeah. Did you know that when you were born? No. other people taught us. They encouraged us. They showed us how to do things. Yeah. So when we see our life experience in that way, being arrogant makes absolutely no sense. Because nothing really came from us intrinsically, inherently. Yeah? Every talent and ability comes from other people. Mm-hmm. Now, in America, we like to feel independent. Yeah? I earn my own living. But again, we earn our own living because somebody else gave us a job. Or even if we're self-employed, because other people gave us money. Yeah? So everything that we have, comes due to the kindness of others. And we live in a world where we're completely interrelated with others on every level. It'd be quite interesting if we were all able to check the labels of our clothes. Unfortunately, I got mine at Macy's and they didn't have a label in them. No, I'm joking. But, and to see how many different countries our clothes and our shoes and our glasses and so on came from. And do we even know the people in all these countries who made the clothes that we wear? Did we ever think of the people in these countries who made the clothes? Or think of the people who planted the cotton, if we were wearing cotton in the summer, and harvested the cotton and processed it and so on? Yeah. Do we think of the people in the sweatshops in various countries who made our shoes or who made the fabric, It's like, if we think about it, it's stunning the way one object we have, if we're able to trace it back, actually connects us to so many millions of living beings on this planet. Yeah? Even, we're sitting here right now. Does anybody know who the architect who designed this building was? Or the engineers? Or the construction managers? Or the people who worked in the hot sun to build it? Yeah? When we think about it, our having the ability just to sit and share together this evening is dependent on so many living beings. And not just the carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians, but what about the miners who went down in the earth to get the metals that so many things in this room are made out of? Now, do we ever think about those people and their lives and what it's like to have a job where you're underground all day? And it's quite dangerous being a miner. Yeah? So when we really think about it, actually we are intertwined, interconnected with so many people, and we don't know who they are. And if you really think about it, we've been the recipient of a tremendous amount of kindness all throughout our lives. And yet, being unaware of it, we don't appreciate or thank the people around us. When we're driving on the road and it's construction, they're doing construction, and you have to stop, those times? Yeah. What do we think? Yeah. Do we think, thank you so much for working on this road and making it drivable so that I can just easily get where I want to go? No, we don't think of that. We think, why are you here now when I'm driving? You should be working at 3 in the morning when nobody else is out here. Yeah? And yet, we're dependent on these people's kindness. Yeah? Have you ever thanked your garbage collector? Yeah? I thank garbage collectors whenever I can, because in my travels, I was once in a city where the garbage collectors were on strike. And then you really see the kindness of the garbage collectors at that time. And you really, see what they do and how much they help. Mm-hmm. Now, somebody could say, well, yeah, okay, but they do it to earn a living. They do it to get paid so that they can support their family and go on holidays. So they're not really kind. I don't buy that so much. Because the bottom line is not their motivation. The bottom line is the fact that we have benefited from what they've done. Why they did it, it doesn't matter. Yeah? But the fact that we benefited from it, and that if they hadn't had done what those different actions, or made those different materials, we would really be out of luck. Yeah? So this is an incredible way to train your mind. Yeah? If if in your day you go around and you just deliberately think at everything you look at, who were the people responsible for this being here? Or whatever skill and ability you have, who were the people who taught me? I've noticed that there's a lot of bicycles in town. Yeah? We didn't know how to ride a bicycle by ourselves. Somebody had to teach us. Yeah? Do you remember that? With the training wheels? Yeah. So all the time being the recipient of kindness. And when we train our mind to see this, that it's not just the kindness of our family and friends, but it's also the kindness of strangers, especially the kindness of strangers. Yeah? When we train our mind to see this, then feelings of alienation and loneliness rapidly disappear, because we realize that we're very, very interconnected with people. Yeah? And then, it becomes very easy to talk to people, to thank the people at the gas station, to thank the people at the grocery store, to thank the garbage collector or the janitor in your building. To thank everybody, because in one way or another, we're all interconnected. Now somebody's going to say, yeah, that sounds okay, family, friends. Strangers, yeah, okay, maybe I can see them as kind, but what about my ex-husband and my ex-wife? The person I used to love dearly, who has gone from the friend category into the enemy category. Or what about the neighbor who blares their music in the middle of the night? Or what about the person who dented my car and didn't own up to it? Or what about the person who lied to me or who betrayed my trust? We all have stories to tell, right? I'm sure you can think of 5 people in a finger snap who you can't stand because they've harmed you. Yeah? Okay. What do you mean? Other beings are kind. Those people did this and this and this and this and this. And I can't stand their guts. Right? Yeah? Can't stand them. May they rot in hell. But we're such nice, benevolent, kind people, aren't we? You know, who at Christmas time write, may everybody live in harmony and peace, you know, except so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, in one way or another, even the people who seem to have harmed us have also benefited us in some way. If you really think about it, if you really go into it, because we've all had difficulties, yeah? And we've all lived through them. And often through living through difficulties, we've learned something about ourselves that we didn't learn before. And we've discovered resources in ourselves that we didn't know that we had. Is this true when you think of difficult times in your life? Going through an illness or a divorce or losing a job or, you know, who knows what. Have you in some way grown from the experience and come out stronger and found some resource in yourself to rely upon? Or discovered that there's resources in the community who can help you? That you're not alone? Does that happen to you in times of difficulties? It's happened to me. Yeah. Through situations where I felt so hurt and devastated and broken trust. And now looking back on those experiences, I and the people who were involved, I actually have to say thank you. Because you made me stronger. Yeah, you taught me something that I needed to learn in order to go on and be the person I am today. Some people ask me, you know, you just saw the video of the Abbey, they say, how did you have the courage to start that? Well, frankly, I don't know. But what I do know is that I went through, prior to that, a lot of very difficult experiences that I realize now were crucial for me developing the ability to later begin an Abbey. And that if I hadn't had gone through those difficulties, I would not have had the inner strength to do, you know, to start something. Yeah? So if you look in your life, you know, it happens that way often. Most of my teachers were refugees from Tibet. Around 1950, the communist Chinese armies were advancing in eastern Tibet and then slowly occupied central Tibet. And in 1959, in March, when it's cold, there was an abortive uprising against the occupation. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama and tens of thousands of Tibetans fled over the Himalaya mountains into India. So they went from the highest place on the planet where there are very few bacteria and viruses down to the plains of India that are filled with bacteria and viruses. Yeah? And one of my teachers, he was 24 at the time. He was at Sera Monastery, which was a monastery near Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. So there was fighting going on in the capital, and so he and some of his fellow monks went to the mountains behind the town. If you're a Tibetan monk in pre-59 Tibet, your one precious possession was your wooden bowl that acted as your tea bowl, your food bowl. Everywhere you went, you kept your bowl. So they took their bowls into the mountains. They thought the fighting would stop in a couple of days and they would come back and resume their studies at the monastery. Well, that wasn't what happened, because when they figured out that the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in danger, His Holiness snuck out of the country, and then of course when many Tibetans heard this, they fled as well. So my teacher, Lama Yeshe, was one of those. He had only his tea bowl and, set off with his companions across the Himalayas and wound up in, crossing them, coming into India. And Nehru, the Prime Minister of India at that time, was incredibly kind to the Tibetans and let them stay as refugees. And the only place they had to give them at that time was Buxa, which was the British POW camp. Did any of you see 7 Years in Tibet? Yeah? So in that movie, that POW camp, was where the Tibetan monks went when they fled. And so he was there for a number of years, and then he was able to leave and, finally established a monastery of his own, and then wound up teaching us flaky Westerners who kind of found our way to Nepal in our, this was the 70s, kind of. Yeah, the 70s? Yeah? Yeah, did I see some of you somewhere? Okay, so, we kind of trundled up the hill to Kapan Monastery, and, hi, Lama. What do you think about dropping acid and meditating, Lama? His reply was, you're already hallucinating, dear. You don't need to take drugs. But, so he was teaching people like us. The Tibetans didn't know anything about the outside world, and, it wasn't like he had a English as a second language course. He was, finding his words and learning to say things. One of his favorite words was, "This is fantastic," because F's were difficult. They don't have F's, so fantastic. So I remember Lama one day telling us about how he escaped from from Tibet, and and went to Buxa, and the camp, and stayed there. And his friends were getting sick and dying, and he had some heart disease, so it was difficult for him. And I remember one time, when he was telling us this story, and he put his palms together, he put his hands together, and he said, I really have to thank Mao Zedong for how my life turned out. I have to thank Mao Zedong, because if I hadn't had, if I weren't forced to flee Tibet, I would have stayed there, finished my education, gone back to my home monastery, and I would have been spoiled by all the people, and I would have never had to really deeply think about the meaning of the Buddha's teachings. But due to the hardship I went through, due to the kindness of Mao Zedong, I discovered the beauty of the Buddha's teachings, and I grew. Can you believe that? Yeah? So, even the ability to see the kindness of those who have harmed us. If we can do this, we can completely turn our lives around. Because if we can see their kindness and thank them for how we have had to grow due to the difficulties, then we will be completely free from grudges and resentment. Okay. When people harm us and we hold on to that harm and even make it our identity and take that pledge to never speak to them again as long as I live, who's suffering then? When we hold a grudge, who suffers? We do, don't we? Yeah. The other person's out having tea somewhere, watching a movie. We're sitting there year after year reviewing the horrible things they did to us. Yeah? And growing old, being angry and bitter individuals. Yeah? Whereas if we can look at the kindness of those people and appreciate our growth, then we don't grow old with anger, resentment, and bitterness. Yeah. We grow old with a kind heart. We grow old with forgiveness. We grow old with the ability to connect to other people instead of walling ourselves in because we've been hurt before. So seeing the kindness of others is something that benefits us. Yeah. His Holiness Dalai Lama also says, when he speaks about compassion, he says, we usually think that the person who's the recipient of our compassion is the one who receives the benefit and gets the good deal, because we're kind and we give them something or we do something for them. But he said that's not actually the case. Then if I could speak as His Holiness, he says, when I'm compassionate, I experience the benefit inside myself of having kindness and compassion in my heart. The person towards whom I share that compassion, I cannot control their mind, so I don't know if they benefit from the compassion I'm extending to them. But I know I benefit first and foremost by having a compassionate heart. And when you think about it, it's really true. Yeah? Because when we have a kind heart, when we have a compassionate heart, our mind is at peace. Yeah? If we understand what compassion is properly, our mind is energized, but it's also peaceful. It's free from afflictions. So we're the real ones who benefit from generating compassion, not the person who's the recipient of it. Did you ever think like that? I had never never thought like that before, but when he said that, I said, you know, it's absolutely right. Because compassion in our hearts, you know, means that we can connect with others, we can empathize with others, we wish them well, we wish them to have happiness and to be free of suffering. And when we have those kinds of wishes in our own heart, our hearts are peaceful and open. When we hold on to grudges, when we concretize our anger and our hostility, then our own heart shuts down and we're quite miserable. We feel misunderstood. We feel that, you know, others don't care about us. But all of that is actually a result not of others and their behavior towards us, but it's a result of our walling ourselves off from others by holding on to anger and resentment and vengeance, wanting retaliation. That makes some sense to you? Can you see how that might be in your own lives? And I think grudge holding is especially poisonous, not only to ourselves, but to future generations. Okay? Do you remember when Yugoslavia split up into so many different countries? And all the people in the different provinces were intent on killing each other? What was the reason they hated each other? Because 300 years ago, your ancestors did this to my ancestors. Is that a good reason to hate somebody now? I wasn't alive then. They weren't alive then. Our ancestors are dead. Yeah. Why is it that we continue the grudge and the hate? Because we were taught that by our parents. Each ethnic group or racial group taught their children how to feel resentment and hatred, and as a result, when Yugoslavia broke up, there was, you know, so much carnage. Mm-hmm. So if you really love your children, don't teach them to hate other people. Yeah? Teach them to forgive and model that forgiveness yourself. Yeah. My parents used to say, do what I say, not what I do. Yeah. Kids are smart. Kids watch what their parents do. Words are cheap. We watch what they do. We learn from that. Yeah. My family, yeah, especially on my mother's side of the family, oh boy, they had so many grudges towards each other. Yeah. I couldn't even keep it straight when I was little about who I was supposed to talk to and not talk to. Even though I was this big, don't talk to those people. Why not? They're our relatives. Because why? Because, you know, you can't play with them because their grandmother and your grandmother had a fight 60 years ago. Adults are really intelligent. Yeah. I remember as a kid just wanting to meet an intelligent adult. Yeah? Because all the grown-ups I met, the way they thought was so ridiculous. You know? They would have a big family celebration, like a wedding or some big family get-together, making a seating chart was impossible. Because this one didn't speak to that one, who didn't speak to this one, who didn't speak to that one, who didn't speak to this one. On and on and on. They're all blood relatives. They don't speak to each other. That's the example I saw as a child. And I said, I am not going to be like that. Yeah. But I see many of my cousins are like that. They don't speak to their siblings or their parents or whoever. Yeah. And it's sad. It's sad holding on to those kinds of things. And then the parents really set the example for the kids. And that's so harmful to the children. So somehow we've got to find it in our own hearts, the room to put down our own anger. Because that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is deciding, I am tired of being angry. Yeah. Doesn't mean what the other person does was okay. You're not saying, oh, you beat me up, I forgive you, you can beat me up again. Yeah. You're not saying that. You're just saying, I'm tired of hating. I'm tired of making an identity of being a victim of somebody else's obnoxious behavior. I want to be free. I want to be free in my own mind from my own anger and resentment. So forgiveness is something that we do for ourselves. We're the chief beneficiary when we forgive somebody else. Don't you think? Yeah? You know, whether we're able to go to them and say something or not is irrelevant. The fact in our heart of releasing our negative emotions and forgiving them, that frees us. And then we have so much energy. Because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to hold on to anger and hatred. And it's painful. Yeah? So just the thing of putting it down, yeah, and realizing, you know, that person who harmed me was under the influence of their own mental afflictions, maybe their own self-centeredness, their own greed, their own pain. Yeah. So it's not like they're a bad person. They were overcome by their own mental afflictions. In the same way that sometimes I'm overcome by my mental afflictions. And we make mistakes, don't we? We've done things motivated by clinging attachment or spite, jealousy. So, you know, we've been overwhelmed by our mental afflictions. Other people sometimes are overwhelmed by theirs. Doesn't mean that we're bad people. Yeah. It just means that sometimes we don't have control of our own minds, which is a real tragedy, not only for others, but for ourselves. So if we can give ourselves some understanding and some compassion for the times when we've acted in harmful or obnoxious ways, yeah, then we become able also to give others some kindness and compassion and forgiveness when their minds were overwhelmed by negative attitudes. Yeah? And realize that the behavior and the person are different. This is something that's really, really important, okay? A person is not their behavior. Yeah? A behavior is simply an action. The person is something different. From the Buddhist viewpoint, we say that each and every person, each individual, has what we call the Buddha nature, the potential to become a fully awakened person, a potential to develop impartial love and compassion for others, the potential to understand the nature of reality and develop very penetrating wisdom. You know, each of us have amazing potential. But the fact that our minds are covered by the clouds of ignorance, anger, jealousy, attachment, greed, these kinds of things. So we limit our own potential when our own minds are sabotaged or overwhelmed by these disturbing emotions. But these disturbing emotions are not who we are, they are not the nature of our mind, and the actions we do motivated by those disturbing emotions are also not who we are. They're simply actions. So we develop the ability to look at each person and see their amazing potential and separate that from their actions. So we can say the actions are harmful, but we can't say the person is evil. Now somebody's going to raise their hand and say, what about ISIS? What about Osama bin Laden? What about Hitler and Stalin, Mao Zedong? Weren't they evil? I remember Lamet Yeshe, that one I told you about, when we asked him that question, he said, "They means well, dear." That was how he spoke English. He called everybody dear. They means well, dear. And it really made me think that everybody, you know, because I can see it in myself, when my mind is overwhelmed by disturbing emotions, I can't think clearly. And I do actions that I think are good, that are beneficial for myself, that I don't realize until afterwards made a mess in my life and sometimes other people's lives. Yeah. And so even extreme situations, you know, like the people in ISIS, in one part of their mind, they mean well. Of course, their philosophy's totally skewed, you know, of course. You know, to think it's virtuous to kill other people, no. Yeah. But by the same token, our country should also realize it's not virtuous to kill other people. Yeah. Be those people our own citizens with capital punishment, or the citizens of other places. Yeah. But to see that every individual in their heart wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer, but the power of the disturbing emotions makes all of us do things that are the cause of more suffering instead of the cause of the happiness we want. When you begin to see this in your own life, you can begin to see it in other people's lives, and then as we develop some compassion for ourselves, we develop some compassion for other people, because we realize that so often we sabotage ourselves, that it isn't other people at all, it's our own self-sabotage, because our disturbing emotions were running the show. So then we learn ways to forgive ourselves, to purify, to develop our good qualities. And we become more open-minded and tolerant, knowing that other people as well can change. Yeah. That just as we are not our actions, other people are not their actions. Yeah. It's a nice viewpoint. It gives us a whole lot of space. At the Abbey, we do work with incarcerated people. Yeah, I never intended to write to prisoners, but somehow it happened. And then I wound up going into prisons and so on. And some of the people that I work with have done the actions that I am most afraid of. But when I see these people, I don't see those actions. I see a person who's trying to get happy, who wants to learn how to work with their own mind, who wants to change despite habits, and conditioning that are sometimes difficult. And that's very rewarding, like the person that normally, if you heard somebody did so this and such, you would go, yeah, goodbye. You have a conversation with and you realize, wow, they're not that different from me. Okay, so this is a little bit, I think, about employing wisdom and compassion in our daily lives. What I'd like to do now is open it to questions and comments and have you bring up what is important for you.
Well, I've heard the concept that if you hold a grudge and don't speak to someone, you hurt yourself. But I've been on the opposite side where people haven't spoken to me, and that also hurts the other person.
Yeah.
So how do you address that?
Okay, so when our holding grudges against other people hurts us, but when other people hold grudges against us, we are also hurt by it. Because maybe they're people that we cherish, that we care a great deal about, who are now kind of throwing us out in one way or another. Again, I think it's a thing of compassion. If other people are holding a grudge against us, to realize how much they're hurting unnecessarily. Yeah, they're hurting because of the way they're interpreting something and they're clinging on to it, and they're hurting themselves. Yeah, and to have compassion for somebody who is hurting themselves. And to realize that, yes, it hurts us, but we can bear that. Because we have the wisdom to understand what's going on. Yeah. But they're really overwhelmed by their own suffering right now. And so to wish them well, to be friendly to them as much as we can, to, when we think of them, extend, our own loving kindness to them, even if it's just through a prayer or a wish or an aspiration. Because the positive attitude in our mind is what is important. We can't control somebody else's mind. I see what you're trying to say, that in prison, you're saying that there's a lack of discipline and control in prison, so it can be very dangerous. And so you're saying that means that everybody can do what they want. When I think of people doing what they want, I don't think of them necessarily harming other people. Yeah, there's a lot of violence in prison. Yeah, it's not a pretty place. Yeah, but I wouldn't exactly say that people could do whatever they want. Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of politics in prison, and there's a lot of social pressure in prison. And in many ways, you are trapped by the social pressure and politics among the other inmates and among the prison guards. Yeah. And there are certain societal rules in prison about how you're supposed to behave. And if you don't behave that way, you know, you're in trouble. So there's, I wouldn't say everybody can do what they want. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for your kindness and generosity in coming to speak here tonight.
Thank you.
Secondly, I have experienced personally that one of the things that in unkindness that can harm others that you don't realize is unkindness toward yourself and not forgiving yourself. That it hurts so many others.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that when we don't forgive ourselves, it also can have the effect of harming others. Yeah, that's very true. You know, we have this idea sometimes that I'm an individual and I could do what I want and it's not going to affect anybody else. And that's wrong, you know, especially in the kind of situation where other people really care about us, and for one reason or another we're going through a difficult time, or we don't have a lot of self-esteem, so we harm ourselves. That harms the people who care about us because we are interrelated. It's not like, hey, I can do what I want and tough luck on anybody else. People care about us. Yeah? And sometimes it's really difficult for us to get that, to really get that people care about us. And when we don't forgive ourselves, when we are unkind to ourselves, when we self-sabotage, we're also harming other people. I was invited some years ago to speak at a conference of survivors of suicide, you know, friends and relatives of people who suicided. And the pain that these people go through is absolutely astounding. If any of, I'm sure somebody in this room has known somebody who, you know, committed suicide. It's astounding. And the person who suicided doesn't realize how much pain they're inflicting on their loved ones. They're just thinking basically of themselves, incorrectly thinking that this will stop my suffering, which it doesn't. But then it also causes harm. So sometimes we have to really sit there and let it into our own hearts that people care about us. Yeah? And to not harm ourselves and to not self-sabotage. Is this what you're getting at? Yeah.
Been on both ends of that, of being unkind to myself and seeing others. There was a girl who, in my PE class in summer school, who I barely knew, who wanted to kill herself, and I went home and I just cried because I couldn't believe that a beautiful girl.
Yeah. 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 So you've been on both sides of it. Yeah. And how painful that is when somebody else harms themselves, even if it's somebody you don't know very well. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I ask another question?
Let me see questions from other people who haven't had a chance to ask questions yet.
Okay.
Okay. Are there other questions? Yes.
Thank you. As the other people in the audience said, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. This is very inspiring. And as a non-Buddhist, I have a lot of naive questions, of course. Is there a place in Buddhism for righteous anger? And what I'm thinking about here is Martin Luther King.
Uh-huh.
Martin Luther King didn't vilify individuals, but he stood up and said, there are things in society that are wrong. We can't simply stay in our comfort zones and not do something about the wrongs that are happening to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that sort of social action, standing up to wrong behaviors and wrong social institutions, where does Buddhism come down on that?
Okay, so where does Buddhism stand in the sense of speaking out for injustice
And doing something about it.
and doing something about it? You know, compassion isn't just, sitting there and smiling. Yeah. People often have the wrong idea of compassion. They think compassion is you just sit there. Yes, dear, I have so much compassion. You beat me up last night. I forgive you. You can beat me up again today. Or they think compassion is you're just the doormat of the world. Yes, just walk all over me. It's okay. I think that's rather stupid, personally. Okay? I think to be really, you have to have tremendous courage to be compassionate. Tomorrow night, if you come to the book signing with Russell Colts and I, my co-author for An Open-Hearted Life, we talk about this a lot in the book, that being compassionate requires tremendous courage because it means that you are willing to sometimes put your life in danger or to do what other people are going to not like, but that is the right thing to do for the benefit of a group of people. Yeah? This question about righteous anger comes up a lot. Personally speaking, I don't like the idea of righteous anger because I've seen too many people harmed in the name of righteous anger. Because my side always has the righteous anger against the other people who are wrong. But of course they think they have the righteous anger to be mad at my side, So I have difficulty with righteous anger. But anger does not and is not the only motivator to intervene in situations of injustice or oppression or whatever. Yeah, I think compassion can be very, very powerful. Yeah, because when you have compassion, you intervene to do what is, the most beneficial for everybody concerned. You're not taking sides and I'm only helping this one against that one. You're trying to solve a bigger problem that is usually unsolvable immediately. But you go ahead and try anyway because you care about other living beings. And I think compassion can be a very strong motivator in that way. Yeah? And I think of, if you look at the Palestinian situation and the Tibetan situation, both of those people lost their countries around the same time. Neither one of them has their own country back now. But how many people have been killed in the Palestinian struggle, and how many people have been killed in the Tibetan struggle. There's a big difference. Big difference. Yeah? So I think compassion can speak very loudly, and this idea that only through violence will we get our ways, I think that is flat out wrong. It's appealing. Yeah. I'm going to beat you up until you do things my way. I'm going to balm you until you decide I'm right. What do they call that? Winning the battle and losing the war? Yeah, because it just results in more oppression and more unhappy people. And when we live in a world with unhappy people, we're going to be unhappy. Yeah? So we have to have that kind heart and help as much as we can.
If we have a problem with someone and our impulse is to do something kind for that person, how do we get the courage to do it?
So somebody's mad at us, or we're mad at them?
Somebody has, let's see, this is true, somebody has hurt me, but I want to do
Something kind. So how do you get the courage to be kind?
how do I-
You just do it.
But how do I?
You just do it. You stop the mind, the mental chatter. Oh, if I'm kind, what are they going to think of me? And what's so-and-so going to think of me? And this and that and that. You just turn the empty chatter off and do what you want to do. Yeah? Okay, one last question. Where? Oh, yes.
About afflicted thoughts and emotions, it seems, in my personal experience at least, that they tend to gain momentum in my mind much more easily than when I'm in a mood of like kindness and charity. I was just wondering if you could say a few words on practices that you use to make it easier to be kind and to let your moods of like kindness have the same kind of momentum that the negative moods have.
Okay. Okay, so practices of kindness that can build up momentum in our lives. Yeah. I think that this reflection that we did at the beginning about the kindness of others, if you do it on a daily basis, either in your meditation practice, going through different situations or different objects or whatever it is, and thinking of the number of people behind it whose efforts are in there, and you do that kind of that meditation consistently, it really changes your whole attitude towards people. Completely changes your attitude towards people. Yeah? And then it becomes, of course, the more we see ourselves as the recipient of kindness, then automatically the wish to be kind comes. We don't have to do a whole lot because the wish to repay that kindness just comes. Yeah? And so then you act out that wish without self-censorship. Yeah? And you just act it out, and with no expectation of how the other person is going to respond. Because if you do something kind, and then you're waiting like, okay, are they going to say thank you? Are they going to say, oh, you're the most marvelous person in the world? If we're holding out for some kind of something on our side, we're digging ourselves into a ditch. We have to learn to be generous, to be kind, and make the doing of the action the reward. Not somebody else is saying how kind you are, how marvelous you are, and then we could go. Yeah, not that. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay, one last question.
I come from China. I'm a student at WSU.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting phenomenon that in Eastern Asian countries like China, Japan, and South Korea, like the most Buddha temples built in the mountains, miles away from the noisy place. But like in America, all the churches built in the with high population densities, like in the downtown of the city. So my question is, do you think maybe it's more important to find an environment that fosters like a peaceful mind, happiness, rather than just doing the meditation at home, which is when we're in very noisy cities? Because I think to some degrees, as you mentioned in your previous comment, that I think like to some degrees, there's also worse like the prison. Like you said, we can hardly find a peaceful position in the prison because there are politics and there are social pressures. So, do you think like maybe it's more practical for us to find an environment rather than to practice the meditation or other things? I'm not questioning the power of meditation.
Okay. I think you said find a peaceful environment rather than do meditation?
I think just maybe it's more practical for people who have no idea.
Oh, I think we need to find a good environment and do meditation. Okay? Because just living in a peaceful environment doesn't develop the inner qualities that we need to have a consistently peaceful mind. Because the thing is that our confusion, our anger, our attachment, it goes everywhere we go. Yeah, people say that sometimes. Oh, you're a monastic in the monastery in the countryside. You've escaped from all the problems of the world. And I say to them, if it were so easy to escape from the problems of the world, why don't you cut your hair and put on some robes? If that's all you need to do to escape problems, why not? But the problem is that our mind goes with us everywhere. So unless we tame our mind, and develop the thoughts and feelings and views and perspectives that counteract ignorance, anger, and clinging attachment. Unless we do that, then we may live in a peaceful, beautiful place, but as soon as some small thing comes, like one mosquito, we're going to get mad. Yeah? So it's really a thing of taming the mind. When our mind is tamed, then anybody we're with, anywhere we go, we can be content and happy. When our mind is not tamed, even we have the most luxurious, wonderful situation with people that we, love, we're still going to be unhappy. Yeah. So it really depends on taming the mind and developing the good qualities. Okay, this one's really the last question.
Well, in my experience, it's the spirit within us that can tame the mind. Because that goodness of the spirit within us, which we are all born, it is inborn in us, in my belief, then the mind is just something we learn to control. We choose because we choose goodness or we don't. Does that make any sense to you?
Kind of. I don't use the language of, the spirit in us. And I realized that I didn't define mind. Okay. When I define mind, I don't mean the intellect.
Good point.
Okay? I mean the whole cognitive, aware, feeling, perceptual aspect of ourselves. So when I say mind, it also includes feelings and emotions.
Which are very, very, very part of our beings. And I mean, we all have emotions.
Yeah.
And the intellect clues us in on it. But, you know,
Yeah, so the thing still is, you know, sometimes we have wrong views, so the intellect takes us in the wrong place. Sometimes we have disturbing emotions, that is, take us in, you know, into a mess. So the whole thing is, if we can develop correct views, we can develop positive emotions. And so the whole thing is to train the mind, you know, to realize that we do not have a fixed personality. We cannot say, I'm an angry person, I blow up, everybody just has to live with it because that's the way I am. Sorry, that doesn't hold water, okay? We do not have some fixed personality. We are very malleable. But we have to choose to want to familiarize ourselves with different attitudes and different emotions. If we make that choice and we learn the methods how to do that, then because causes produce results, we will definitely change.
human relations are very, very important.
Yes. Yeah. And our relationship with ourself is the most important. We have to learn how to be our own friend.